right, between this emphasis on people, right, making making themselves available to fight the battle, and the fact that the battle is really won by God. All right. So list hear, O ye kings, give ear, O ye princes. I unto the Lord will I sing. I will sing praise to the Lord, the God of Israel. Lord, when thou didst go forth out of Seir, when thou didst march out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens also dropped, yea, the clouds dropped water. Right. So you see how this particular type of poetry works here in these couple of verses, right? We see that there's these constant repetition, right? And Alter calls it incremental repetition, because every little extra bit, every new bit of a line adds a little bit more detail. Uh,
Mm.
and so it's a form of biblical poetry, right? All biblical poetry is based on parallelism, but not all of it does this sort of incremental repetition. All right, so you see the earth tremble and the heavens also dropped. Well, what did they drop? They dropped water. Right? The mountains quaked at the presence of the Lord, even yon Sinai at the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel. All right, so very interesting, right? This implication of Sinai, right? And this idea of trembling, right? Because no one really knows where Sinai is, right? But we're going to um, uh, Deborah in this song is going to invoke Sinai as a sort of uh, place where God's presence, you know, is par excellence, right? Where everyone trembled, everything trembled, and everything was crazy, right? And people were scared. Right? And here we go. In the days of Shamgar, the son of Anah, in the days of Yael, the highways ceased and the travelers walked through byways. The rulers ceased in Israel. They ceased until thou didst arise, Devorah. Thou didst arise a mother in Israel. This is one of my favorite little lines in 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 this in this uh, in this poem, right? Aim the Israel, right? Devorah is rises up as a mother, right? As a protective mother, right? Because in the days of Shamgar, right, in Yael, people couldn't go on the highways, right? It was too dangerous. There was too many attacks by the local inhabitants, whatever, right? And so people had to walk through the byways, right? They had to sneak around, right? And there was no ruler after Shamgar, right? And it was in that context, right, that Deborah rose up, right, as a protective mother in Israel, right? They chose new gods. Then was war in the gate. Was there a shield or spear among among 40,000 in Israel? My heart is toward the governors of Israel that offer themselves willingly among the people. Bless ye. All right. So again, right, we see that there's this idea that when there was no one ruling in Israel, what did the people do? The same pattern that we see again and again in Judges, right? That the people will go and worship other gods, and we'll see this very clearly in the story of Gideon that follows. My heart is towards the government, right? The ones that offer themselves willingly. So from verse 10. Ye that ride on white asses, ye that sit on rich cloths, and ye that walk by the way, tell of it. Louder than the voice of archers by the watering troughs. There they shall rehearse the righteous acts of the Lord, even the righteous acts of his rulers in Israel. Then the people of the Lord went down. Awake, awake, Devorah. Uri, Uri, Devorah, Uri, Dabrish, ear. Right? Awake, awake, Devorah, awake, awake, utter a song, arise. Right? So there's a scholar suggested that this word to use dabri shir, right? Generally, we sing songs, we don't speak them, right? But that this is a pun on the letters of the name of Devorah, right? The
That
Devorah,
makes.
of course, is the word for
Oh,
beast,
Deborah.
right? In Hebrew, um,
De-
so like queen bee, I guess. But Dabri is also from this, has the same letters in it, and so this is part of the alliteration and assonance of this poem, which is quite significant, right? And so Devorah will sing the song, and Barak will lead thy captivity captive, thou son of Abimelech. He then made a remnant to have dominion over the nobles and the people. The Lord made me have dominion over the mighty. All right, so now we will continue. Out of Ephraim came they whose root is in Amalek. I don't understand this. I don't know how it can be Amalek. Makes no sense to me. In 8th time, it says, this is a puzzling comment about the origins of citizens of Ephraim. An old solution that continued into the Middle Ages interprets the passage as referring to heroes who stemmed from Ephraim and fought against Amalek. I don't know if that's right or not. Just in case you don't remember, Amalek is the sort of the archetypal enemy of the Israelites. All right, so after thee, Benjamin, among thy people out of Machir came down governors, and out of Zebulun, they that handled the marshal staff, and the princes of Issachar were with Devorah, as was Issachar, so was Barak. Into the valley they rushed forth at his feet. Among the divisions of Reuben, there were great resolves at heart. But why sattest thou amongst the sheepfolds to hear the pipings of the flocks? At the diversions of Reuben, there were great searching. Right? Very interesting, right? That it's talking about how all the various people came forward, except for Reuben, despite their great resolves of the heart, right? They actually didn't come down, right? Reuben hung out around their sheepfolds, right, and did not participate. This altar points out that this is part of the challenge of the structure of Israelite society without a king, right? There's no way to ensure that every tribe will come and participate in the wars of Israel, right? And so we'll see, I think here it's Reuven and Dan are two of the tribes that don't participate for whatever. So Gilead abode beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why doth he sojourn by the ships? Asher dwelt by the shore of the sea and abideth by his base. So all these different tribes didn't come. But Zebulun is the people that jeoparded their lives unto the death, and Naphtali upon the high places of the field. The kings came, they then fought the kings of Canaan in Ta'anach by the waters of Megiddo, but they took no gain of money, right? So the kings of Canaan came to fight against the Israelites, right? But they took no spoil. They were not able to defeat the Israelites. Excuse me one second, close the door here. All right. They fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. Right? So very interesting how we have this shift right away. Right? We talk about all of the Israelites that came down to fight, right? And then who was actually doing the fighting? It was actually the stars in the sky, right? Who were fighting against Sisera. Right? So God is called Adonai Tzevaot, right? The Lord of hosts. And those hosts are considered the hosts of heaven, right? All the stars and so on and so forth, right? So that it was actually God doing the fighting, even though obviously it was people on the ground. All right, the brook Kishon swept them away, that ancient brook. The brook Kishon, oh my soul, tread them down with strength. And then did the horse hooves stamp by reason of the prancings of their mighty ones. All right, so this image of the horse hooves prancing or stomping, right, is an image that will come up again and again here. And we saw the brook Kishon, right? That was where Sisera would go for a bath, right, and come up with enough fish in his beard to feed his whole army, right? But here it's going to be sweeping away all of the Canaanite soldiers. Okay, so again, now we have this, again, we have the same topic, right? Again and again, we have this, right? Curse ye Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse ye bitterly the inhabitants thereof. It's not exactly clear what Meroz is, where it is, but it's some sort of Israelite town, right? Why are they going to be cursed? Because they came not to the help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord against the mighty, right? Very interesting, again, this notion that on one hand, God does all the fighting God self. On the other hand, if someone doesn't show up to help God, then that's a problem. So it's a very interesting kind of theological conundrum, right? God on one hand is all powerful, and on the other hand, God really wants everyone to be around to help God out. Okay, so now we shift gears entirely, right? And this is like one of the most amazing parts of this poem, is that we shift now entirely from this argument about who came to help and who didn't come to help, and who's blessed and who's cursed, right? And now we look just at Yael, right? We look just at Yael, and what we can do is we can look at this version, and then we can go back and compare it to the version in chapter 4. Because this is just amazing how it's Alter suggests that this is more like almost like a series of cinematic cuts, right? It doesn't tell a linear story, it just sort of shows you various actions and lets you put things together. So blessed above women shall Yael be, the wife of Hever, the Kenite, above women in the tent shall she be blessed. So we start not with Sisera looking for a place to find refuge. We start with Yael and how she's blessed, right? Water he asked, milk she gave him. In a lordly bowl she brought him curd. Like, that's all we hear, right? Her hand she put to the tent pin, and her right hand to the workman's hammer. And with the hammer she smote Sisera. She smote through his head, yea, he pierced and struck through his temples. At her feet he sunk, he fell, he lay. At her feet he sunk, he fell. Where he sunk, there he fell down dead. It's actually not really at her. I mean, at her feet is a fine translation. Let's see what they have here. Yeah. Alter translates it much more literally. Bein ragleha, right? Bein ragleha is between her legs, right? So he fell between her legs. So there's this. So he compares it to sort of like sort of like a travesty of sexual assault, right? Which will make sense in the context of the next stanza of the poem. But it almost seems like it seems like to me it also seems like a travesty of birth, right? That he falls down between her legs, and she is sort of she is in her own way sort of a mother in Israel, saving Israelites by destroying Sisera. And again, you can see in the Hebrew, well, you can see this English does a pretty good job, right? Of again this same kind of incremental repetition, where there's just a little bit more information given each time, right? It's not until the very end, right, that he falls down dead. Or actually, dead is not quite right. Destroyed is probably a better translation of that word, shadud. All right. So let's finish the Song of Devorah, and then we can go back and look at the end of chapter 4 to compare Yael's scene. So what the Song of Devorah adds, which is not in the narrative section, right, is this final little piece, right? So through the window she looked forth, right? It's very interesting how there's this like just this completely unmotivated cut, right? And the she here, at first you might think it was Yael, until as Alter points out, you realize that Yael was in a tent, and so there probably wasn't actually a window in the tent.
Right.
And as you continue this thing, you'll realize, oh, wait a second, it's the mother of Sisera we're talking about. So this is the mother of Sisera, who's probably in some sort of palace, right? And this again, this language of mother, I find to be so interesting, right? We have Devorah as a mother. We have Yael as a kind of, a kind of horrific mother um, uh, with the destroyed Sisera. And then we have the actual mother of Sisera. So through the window she looked forth and peered the mother of Sisera through the lattice. Why is his chariot so long in coming? Why tarry the wheels of his chariot? The wisest of her princesses, probably not her princess, probably this is like her ladies in waiting, right? Answer her, yea, she returneth answer to herself. Uh, are they not finding? Are they not dividing this spoil? A damsel, two damsels to every man. To Sisera, a spoil of dyed garments, a spoil of dyed garments of embroidery, two dyed garments of embroidery for the neck of every spoiler. All right, so that's all we get, right? About that, and then and we'll talk about that in just a second. But just to finish it, right, that the final verse of the poem says, so perish all thine enemies, O Adonai, but they that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might, and the land had rest for 40 years. Whenever there's a new judge who's successful, the land has rest for 40 years, sometimes 80, whatever it is. Okay, so I find this little passage of Sisera to be um, um, so fascinating. Uh, and actually, it's uh, uh, so here we see, right, that there's the sort of dramatic irony, right, that Sisera's mother and her ladies obviously don't know what's happened to Sisera, but they can't imagine, right, that he's not going to come back completely, um, completely victorious, laden with all kinds of spoils, right? And what are the spoils? What are the spoils going to be? It's going to be damsels, right? Meaning the Israelite women will be brought back as sex slaves, right? And their garments, right, will be brought back, and the garments will be given to the Canaanite women as their sort of share of stuff, right? And so, but instead, obviously, what has actually happened is that Yael has destroyed Sisera, and so that is going to be uh, that's the image we're left with, right? Of the women waiting for them to come back and waiting, never actually going to see. And very interesting, right? That this word, alo, here I'll do this again. It makes it a little easier. Alo yisuu halaku shalash rachamatayim, right?
Rechem.
Which is racham, exactly. That's the word that they're translating as damsel. Um, really very complicated. Um, uh, um, this idea of rechem is the word in Hebrew for womb, right? So that there's so this maternal imagery, right? But always with this kind of almost like this. I don't know. I can't quite think of the word, uh, but sort of sort of slightly twisted, right? The idea of a the spoils of war being described as a racham is a little bit disturbing. Racham, by the way, is also the root for rachamim, right? For the Hebrew word for compassion. This seems like the opposite of compassion. There's this beyond the dramatic irony. There's also just the irony, right, of them that this woman is comforting Sisera's mother by imagining this sort of terrible violence and pillage that Sisera and his people will have done. All right, so let's go back. Any questions? All right, so let's go back to chapter 4, and we'll look at the very end of chapter 4, where we see where we can compare the two versions, and then we can continue with the story of Gideon. All right, all right, all right. But Barak pursued after the chariots and after the host unto Harosheth Goyim, and all the host of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword, and there was not a man left. Howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Yael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for there was peace between Jabin, the son of the king of Hazor, in the house of Heber the Kenite. And Yael went out to meet Sisera and said unto him, Turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. And he turned in unto her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said unto her, Give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. And he said unto her, Stand in the door of the tent, and it shall and inquire of thee, and say, Is there any man there, any man here, that thou shalt say no? Then Yael, Heber's wife, took a tent pin and took a hammer in her hand and went softly unto him and smote the pin into his temples, and it pierced through into the ground, for he was in a deep sleep. He swooned and died. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Yael came out to meet him and said unto him, Come, and I will show thee the man whom thou seekest. Right? Notice the altar points out, right, that Barak is pursuing Sisera. Yael doesn't wait for Barak to come in and ask about him, right? She goes out and says, Look, you're looking for this guy, and I know where he is. And he came unto her, and behold, Sisera lay dead, and the tent pin was in his. And so God subdued on that day Jabin, the king of Canaan, before the children. All right. So any observations about the differences between these two versions? So the only thing I want to point out, right, is the degree to which the second version is so economical, right? There's no dialogue, right? There's no dialogue. There's relatively few details, right? The details that are really focused, the details that are given have to do with the difference, asking for milk and giving giving milk, right, and giving in her hands the bowl, right, of the curds, right, and then the focus on her hands as she takes the tools to kill him, right, and all of the other stuff, right, all the other stuff is kind of just left behind. It's sort of if the which I find very interesting, right? Because if Alter is correct and the other scholars are correct in saying that the version in the Song of Deborah is much more archaic than the first one, than the prose version, right? It means that this was a very well-known story, right? And that the poet could really leave out a lot of details and still rest assured that everyone kind of knew the general outline.
Mm.
All right, so let's move on. If there's no other comments, let's move on to the story of Gideon, which is also a great story. Sorry, I don't know why that's on there. Okay, also a great story. Gideon is trying to think of a who is he like? Well, maybe we can come up with a comparison for Gideon, um, because Gideon has no confidence in himself. He's constantly worried that he doesn't have it right, and which I find really fascinating. Because most of these guys, if you think of Ehud, um, if you think of Samson, uh, or Yafeth, you think of these biblical heroes who are they're just completely sure of themselves and have a real sense of their own power. Um, then there's Barak and Gideon. Barak won't go to war unless Devorah comes with him, right? And Gideon, you'll see what Gideon is doing, but he gets obsessed with making sure he's got it right before he goes and does anything. All right. So, and the children of Israel did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. Oi, big surprise, right? After 40 years, right, we need to start doing the bad thing again, right? So we can have another story of a different judge. Okay. And the Lord delivered them into the hand of Midian for 7 years, in the hand of Midian. Right? And the hand of Midian prevailed against Israel. And because of Midian, the children of Israel made them the dens which are in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. And so it was when Israel had sown that the Midianites came up, and the Amalekites too, and the children of the east, and they came up against them, and they encamped against them, and destroyed the produce of the earth till thou come into Gaza, and left no sustenance in Israel, neither sheep nor ox nor ass. For they came up with their cattle and their tents, and they came in as locusts for multitude. Both they
Mm.
camels were without numbers, and they came into the land to destroy it. All right. And Israel was brought very low because of Midian, and the children of Israel cried unto the Lord. All right. So what's going on here? Where is Midian? Does anyone remember? I guess maybe even a better question is, who is a Midianite? Who is the most famous Midianite in the Bible?
Was it the wife of Moses?
Exactly. I mean, actually, I think probably her father was probably a little more famous than she was. Um,
That's true.
but you're absolutely right. Right. So,
That's
and
true.
Moses goes into the wilderness from Egypt, right? So somewhere in the wilderness between Egypt and what we would later call Palestine, right? Is the place of the Midianites. They are nomadic, right? And they are not Canaanites. So this is very interesting, which I hadn't realized until I was rereading this today, um, that this is really a different kind of oppression, right? And so Midian, the Midianites would come into Israel, they would raid, they would destroy the produce of the field, and they would steal the flocks, right? And then they would go back uh, to their place on the other side of the Jordan, right?
Mm.
And they join in. I'm again like, why the Amalekites show up in this case, I'm not quite sure. And what is the distinction? What in who are the children of the East, right? So it's interesting, right? So it seems at first it seems like it's just the Midianites, and then later we seem to have additional enemies who join in the oppression of the Israelites, right? And so all of the land of Canaan gets destroyed. And this sort of interesting, so they try to sort of adapt to it instead of planting in the plains, right? They go up into the mountains, right? And they try to build productive farms up in the mountains, in the strongholds, which are which are crags, right? So they're trying to find uh, defensible places where make their they can do their agriculture, but still the Midianites come, and so this word camels, right? Very there, as Alter points out in his commentary, the biblical narrator has a field day with this camels, right? He loves camels because this is something that the Midianites have and the Israelites presumably do not. All right. So, and it came to pass when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord because of the Midian, that the Lord sent a prophet unto the children of Israel. Very interesting. Ish Navi, it says, right? An Ish Navi, so a prophet man, um, right? Someone who can convey the word of God um, to the people of Israel. And that prophet said to them, "Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you forth out of the house of bondage, and I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all that oppressed you, and drove them out from before you, and gave you their land. And I said unto you, I am the Lord your God. Ye shall not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell, but ye have not hearkened unto my voice." Go ahead, Suzanne.
Do they name the prophet somewhere?
They don't, which I found to be very interesting. So
Oh,
this is just some sort of mouthpiece that so they could have just as easily said it was a malach, an angel. So my assumption, right, is that there must be some sort of commentary somewhere. I just didn't have a chance to look for it because I thought Alter would bring it, but he didn't. Of who this prophet was, because usually the rabbis don't like there to be just a random prophet guy. They like to attach a name to it. But it was interesting to figure out who that is. Um, but no. But this is a very common sort of prophetic
yeah.
pronouncement, right? I did this. This is what I said that you should do, and you have not done it, right? And so in here, right here is the malach that I talked about, right? Hold on a second. Um, whoa, right here, Vayavo malach, right? And the angel of the Lord came, right? So I don't know if we just don't hear anymore from the prophet, right? But now we have an angel, right? And the angel of the Lord came uh, and sat under the terebinth which was in Ophrah, that belonged unto Joash the Abiez, Ab, Abiezerite, and his son Gideon was beating out wheat in a wine press to hide it from the Midianites. Right. This is the length to which they're going to try to save their provisions. Right. They're doing everything sort of undercover. Um, And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said unto him, "The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor," right? which I love, right? Adonai imcha gibor hechayil, right? A mighty man of war, right? A valorous man, right? A gibor, right? A gibor is like a strong man. And then Gideon said unto him, "Oh my Lord, if the Lord be with us," it's like, well, my Lord, if you're really the Lord, right? Why then is all this befallen us, and where are all his wondrous works which our fathers told us of, saying, Did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord hath cast us off and delivered us into the hands of Midian. And the Lord turned to him So very interesting, right? If we had the angel, right? We have the angel here, we have the angel here, but now we don't have the angel anymore, right? It's just God, right? It's just Adonai, right? And the Lord turned towards him and said, "Go in this thy might and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent thee?" Um, and so Gideon might remind you, right, of a certain other prophet, even though Gideon is not a prophet, right? He just doesn't believe, right? He can't grasp this notion that God has suddenly made him a hero that's going to save Israel. And so Gideon says unto God, "Oh my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? How am I going to do that? Right? Behold, my family is the poorest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." Right? I'm the youngest. Right? So this again, of course, we know this pattern in the Bible again and again. Right? The youngest son of the poorest family is the one who ends up saving. Right? And and the Lord said unto him, "Surely I will be with thee, and thou shalt smite the Midianites as one man." And he said unto him, "If now I have found favor in thy sight, then show me a sign that it is thou that talkest with me." Right? He still doesn't believe it. He can't quite accept it. "Depart not hence, I pray thee, until I come unto thee and bring forth my present, right, my offering, and lay it before thee." And he said, "All right, I will tarry until thou come back." I mean, it's very interesting how God in this episode is very indulgent with Gideon. Doesn't get upset with him, or so it seems, right, for this constant lack of confidence. And Gideon went in and made ready a kid and unleavened cakes and an ephah of meal. The flesh he put into a basket, and he put the broth in a pot and brought it out unto him under the terebinth and presented it to him. And the angel of the Lord said unto him, "Take the flesh and the unleavened cakes and lay them upon this rock and pour out the broth." And he did so. And the angel of the Lord put forth the end of the staff that was in his hand and touched the flesh and the unleavened cakes. And there went up fire out of the rock and consumed the flesh and the unleavened cakes. And the angel of the Lord departed out of his sight. And Gideon saw that it was the angel of the Lord. And Gideon said, "Alas, alas, oh my God, it was God after all." Right? "As much as I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." Right? So the Lord has to come back, right? And says, "Peace be unto thee, fear not, thou shalt not die." Right? So God is constantly calming. He's got a very insecure and anxious hero right here. Right?
Yes.
I don't know. I can't say for sure that it's meant to be played for comedy, but it is very funny. Um, the degree to which the sort of lack of confidence here, and the self-deprecating sort of way of Gideon, like, "Oh my gosh, you actually are God, and now I'm going to die." All right. So then Gideon built an altar there for unto the Lord, and called it Adonai Shalom, right? Adonai Shalom, so Adonai peace, right? And unto this day it is yet in Ophrah of the Abiezerites. And it came to pass the same night that the Lord said unto him, "Take thy father's bullock, and the second bullock of 7 years old, and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down the Asherah that is by it, and build an altar unto the Lord thy God upon the top of this stronghold in the ordered place, and take the second bullock, and offer a burnt offering with the wood of the Asherah, which thou shalt." The Asherah is like the maypole. All right. So this, I think, is really fascinating, right? So because as it turns out, right, the dangerous thing, the first dangerous thing that Gideon needs to do, right, is not go against the Midianites, but to go against his father and the rest of the Israelites, right, who have decided that uh, that they're no longer beholden to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, right? They're beholden to Baal, and they built an altar to Baal and a fertility pole, um, to the female consort of Baal, And so Gideon and Gideon is it seems to me, I don't know for a fact, but it seems to me that this 7-year-old bull, right, is pointing to the 7 years that the Midianites have oppressed the
Oh,
oppressed the
uh-huh.
Israelites, and that's why we have 7 years, because um, it's been 7 years since they've been worshiping Baal. So Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had spoken unto him. And it came to pass, because he feared his father's household and the men of the city, so that he could not do it by day, that he did it by night. Right. So you see again, right, the palpable fear that Gideon is laboring under. He's afraid of everything. He's afraid of the Midianites. He's afraid of God, and he's afraid of the people of his own city. And when the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, Hine, right? That great biblical word, Hine. Look at that. The altar of Baal was broken down, and the fertility pole was cut down that was by it, the Asherah. And the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. And they said unto one another, Who hath done this thing? And when they inquired and asked, they said, Gideon the son of Joash hath done this thing. Then the men of the city said unto Joash, Bring out thy son that he may die, because he hath broken down the altar of Baal, and because he has cut down the Asherah that was by it. And Joash, which is really interesting, because it's, Joash is presented as the guy who owns this altar to Baal, right? Joash comes out and defends his son.
Hmm.
Seems somewhat unmotivated, but but he's the one that brings this story, right? Will ye contend for Baal, or will ye save him? He that will contend for him shall be put to death before morning. If he be a god, being Baal, let him contend for himself, because one hath broken down his altar. So therefore, on that day, it was called Yerubbaal, Yerubbaal, which I'm imagining he's the destroyer of Baal, saying, Let Baal contend against him, because he hath broken down his altar. All right, so now this may remind you, if you're familiar with it, of the Midrash about Abraham, right? So Abraham is seen as the iconoclast, right? The one who breaks idols. And the story goes that Abraham's father, like Gideon's father, right, was the idol seller. And one day, Abraham destroys all the idols in his father's shop. And when his father comes back and sees them all destroyed, he says, "Why did you break all the idols?" And Abraham says, "I didn't break all the idols. The idols busted each other up. And his father said, "Well, they can't do that. They just sit there. Then why do we worship them?" So this is a similar kind of story. If Baal isn't going to come and defend Baal's own self, right? Why do we need to stand up for him? Which is very clever. So anyway, so we'll just finish up this chapter, because it's brief, and then we will continue with chapter 7, the continuation of the Gideon story next week. So now all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east assembled themselves together, and they passed over, meaning they came over the Jordan, right? They came from the east into the land of Canaan. But the Spirit of the Lord clothed Gideon, right? Enwrapped him, and he blew a horn, and Abiezer was gathered together after him, right? So, but vayit ka bashofar, right? So just like Ehud, when Ehud blows the horn to gather all the armies and to fight against the Moabites, Gideon does the same thing, right? And he sent messengers throughout all of Manasseh, and they also were gathered together after him. And he sent messengers under Asher and under Zebulun and unto Naphtali, and they came up to meet him. And Gideon said unto God, If thou wilt save Israel by my hand, as thou hast spoken. So we see again, like he's still, after all of this, he still has to deck things out, right? So he says, I will put a fleece of wool on the threshing floor, if there be dew on the fleece only, and it be dry upon all the ground, then shall I know that thou wilt save Israel by my hand, as thou hast spoken. And so it was. So he rose up early on the morrow and pressed the fleece together and wrung dew out of the fleece, a bowl full of water. And Gideon said unto God, this I love, right? It's not enough. That wasn't enough.
Oh,
Thine anger be kindled against me, and I will speak but this once. Let me make trial, I pray thee, but this once with the fleece. Let it now be dry only upon the fleece, and upon all the ground let there be dew. And God doesn't get mad. God doesn't get, annoyed. And God did so that night, for it was dry upon the fleece only, and there was dew on all the ground. I'm just fascinated, right? How I mean, and I don't have an answer for this, but we can start. We can next time we can start with this question, which is why did God choose such an impure and sort of disbelieving is the wrong word maybe, but somebody who just couldn't, he just doesn't seem to trust God. It's so interesting that he keeps on doing all these things to overcome his worries. And why does God make Gideon his hero in this case? So we can sort of chew over that question for the week, and we'll start there next week with
okay.
why.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
All
Okay.
right. Oh, next week is too bad. Next week is Veterans Day, so it's gonna be 2 weeks.
Okay. Good enough. Okay. Thanks.
Good. All right, thanks. And let us know. That's a good question. I don't know yet. Yeah, it'll be in the